Yeah, where do we start? Where do we start? Daphne asked me to come out and speak with the men's group here, and of course I didn't know how many people I'd be talking to or sharing with or anything like that. You're all a bunch of fun looking men. And I will say that when it comes to church groups and building up groups in the church, sometimes the small groups are so powerful. And I'm really overwhelmed to see so many of you here tonight. It's really wonderful to see all of you. Daphne, from what I understand, wanted me to come and speak to you a little bit about some of my story. And I would haste to say that I'm no different than anybody else, really. But like everyone, I have a story to tell. And I guess I should have asked Daphne, what part do you want? Part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I feel that I'm here to talk to you about what's happened to me over the last few years and the restoration that I've gone through. Well, I guess a good place to start is to tell you where I came from. To give you some ethos as to who I am and where I'm coming from. I think the first thing we should do is have a prayer. Father, we thank you that you relentlessly pursue those whom you love. We know, as St. Augustine said, that you created us and our hearts will be restless until they are found in you. But in doing so, we learn that your heart is restless until it is found in us. So we ask for your blessing. Make these words that I speak clear to the hearts of those who are willing to receive them. In your name we pray. Amen. I brought my guitar. I don't usually bring my guitar when I go places to speak because as a musician and leader in the church, I've always felt it's my job to get other people to do that, to encourage people. But she insisted that I sing something.
Part of the miracle.
Yeah, so I'll get to that and do good. So if I forget that, can you remind me, okay? All right. My name is John. I'm married to Karen. I have 4 children and 5.5 grandchildren. It's not because one of them's real short, it's that they haven't arrived yet. I was a mechanic before I went into ministry, and probably the best mechanic in Canada, I'd say. That's another story, as you realize, to be called out one trade into this work, and I'm not going to get into all that because that would take a while. But I want to make a long story short for this, so you get a feeling of who I am. Can you guys hear me okay? Can you hear me all right?
John?
Yeah. I come from a home, just me and my brother. My mother was Dutch. My father was a fisherman's son from Chains Islands who went into the army. My parents met in Holland. They were married there and then came back and of course they started their life and had children. Again, making a long story short, okay, I don't want to belabor you with all the details. And some of the stuff that's happened to me, there's people here, I'm sure, who have similar stories perhaps, I don't know. But anyway, my mother and father didn't get along very well. My mom was a person who, perhaps through her war experiences or whatever, all of her arrows pointed in, Everything was about her. And that was part of her brokenness, her woundedness. My father came from a home, I think it was probably a cultural thing in Newfoundland where the father ruled the roost with an iron fist. When Dad was old enough to finish school, he'd get out and go to work. That's the way it was with Dad. My dad followed in his father's footsteps, I suppose, in the sense that he was a very abusive man. He had a lot of issues in his life. He was a heavy drinker. And during my young days, well, you already know it, but I don't need to say anything else, do I? You know what it was like. It was terrible for us. My mother and father tried to be reconciled, and every time we got together, it was worse. Got to a point where when I was about 12 years old, my parents split up again. Mom took me and my brother and ran off to Toronto. Don't get away from it all. Lo and behold, she meets this guy. I come home from school. Mom's gone. So when I was 12, for a year or so, I lived on the streets in Toronto, trying to figure out what to do. And that's the part one, I guess, if you want to call it that. So right after that, you realize that when I was a young man, I had stuff going on in my life. I had issues, perhaps, woundedness, anger, call it what you want. And when I was around 16, I met this young lady that's here in the back. At 4:15 in the morning, she was staying at a friend's place. They were, her parents were down late, so me and my buddies decided we were going to scare the daylights out of these girls. I climbed into the living room window. It was Art London's house. You don't know where it is, so it doesn't matter, anything like that. And I landed on top of Karen. We're in church, so I can't repeat what she said. I looked at Karen and I said, I think I'm in love. And, you know, we've been together ever since. It's been quite a few years.
Wow.
I'm getting there, saying, I'm doing too bad, eh? No, it's not too bad. I'm 5 after 7. Yeah. So anyway, as time went on, we had children. We had 4. By the time we figured out why we were having them, you know, we were a pretty big family. And my first daughter was born while I was away in Ontario. It was like most men in those days. We went away to work. We didn't go to Alberta. We went to Toronto, right? And my mother-in-law was a devout Roman Catholic. So when Shanda was born, she took the baby down to the priest and got the baby down. Right? We're all familiar with that turn of hand. And that didn't bother me. But by the time Alyssa was born, our second daughter, we were back in Newfoundland. Now, just to give you an idea of how I felt about the church, you know, I want you to understand something about that. God was Father. We see God as Father. And it's very hard for young people who have had problem relationships with their dads to see God as a loving Father. It really is, right? Not just for men, for women too, right? It's hard for anybody who's had a problem with their dad to see God as Dad, as Jesus portrays him, you know. So when Karen and I got married, we were living in Toronto at the time. We went downtown. This is going to blow you away. Now, I love telling this to young couples when they get ready to do their marriage preparation. They say, why are you getting married in church? And they say, well, I think it's the right thing to do. It's traditional. Lots of the family around and all this. And I said, let me tell you something. I didn't get married in church. What? I said, no, I'm a priest. So now I get their attention. What's wrong with him, right? At that time in our lives, we were not practicing Christians. We did not practice the faith. And we both had this feeling that we didn't need the church. We didn't need this formality of Christian ritual. Although I was brought up in church, I was confirmed. I was drove to church. Never missed. Right? Dad didn't go. Mom didn't go. But I had to go. Anyway, we kind of some fuss too. I'll tell you, I don't know how many times we ever walked. I had to stop and tell us to be quiet here in the back of St. Andrews. We got married downtown, City Hall, in civil ceremony. So now we'll go back to Glenwood. We're in Glenwood now, our family started, baby number 2 is on the way. Now I put down the foot. Not that would bother Karen, because she does her own thing. But we both agreed, right? We're not going to have a baby baptized. Didn't see the point. Didn't feel the draw to get the baby done so the baby would get a name and all that stuff, right? All the Anglicans believe. Well, I loved my mother-in-law. She was a good friend to me. And she kept after me. That baby doesn't have a name, you know. She says, no, the baby's name is Alyssa. No, not for God. And she'd go on about all this stuff. And I used to torment her. I say, Mother, you never go to church. Why are you so religious? Why is this so important to you? It's just the right thing to do, John. So anyway, one evening I says, okay, I'll go to church. And I'll speak to the minister and I'll make arrangements to get her baptized, okay? About time. So I'm going to go down to St. Andrews in Glenwood, muddle my way through evening prayer. I just still remember the choir trying to get through the Magnificat. Sounded like the Magnificat, you know. I joined the choir after, but anyway, it was something. Yeah. And I walked up to the minister after the service was over and spoke to him. Some of you may know the gentleman I'm talking about. His name was Richard Walters. And people call him Dick. He was a very loving and gentle man. And he loved to get involved in people's lives. He loved to matchmake too. I remember Dick well. He was like a father to me. He loved to get single men and women together. If he figured they'd make a good match, try to get them married. He was famous for that. Anyway, Reverend Walters at that time was not well. He was a severe diabetic. His eyesight was failing. He was having trouble with his legs. And he could hardly see. And when I spoke to him, in the aisle, sort of like this, and he took me by the arm like this. He looked at me. I'll never forget his eyes, his blue eyes. He looked at me. He said, "You're Johnny Watton, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I often wonder what happened to you, my son." And all I can say to you is that something in here opened up. It let go. When Dick spoke that way to me, it was as if God was saying, "John, I finally got you to stop long enough to listen to me." And I guess I was open to it at the time. And I could hear deep within my being, God was saying, "Hear this, I love you." And boy, I tell you, from that day on, there was a change that I was willing to accept. It wasn't a Billy Graham conversion, it wasn't going to the mercy seat, it wasn't anything like that for me at all, but it began a process whereby I was willing to listen to that which was out there, that altar that we call God. And we had our child baptized, and as most of you know, in whatever church you're from, in the Anglican Church, the Roman Catholic Church, even in the Salvation Army, there's initiation for children. And we're required, because we're adults bringing kids to the church, we're required to make promises. And from that experience, I started to try to take these promises seriously. I really did. I really tried. So before you knew it, I was working with young people. I always had a passion for helping young people, street kids and that sort of thing. It had nothing to do with religion, but I wanted to help people. And I began to get involved with setting up a youth group there, started a little band in the church, and got on the vestry. I was church warden there before I knew what happened. I was church warden before I knew what a church warden was. And so I was willing to get involved, and I was so excited about this sense of community that I was getting from this little tiny church in Glenwood. And I remember the evening I was at my house, and I had a bottle of beer on my desk, having a smoke. Now I don't smoke and I don't drink. You know, in those days, this is sort of what you did after work, right? God, if I had a cigarette now, it would kill me. But I gave up smoking after that. But I remember saying, "God, here I am, you know. I'm going to listen to you. What have you got to say to me? I'm ready for you to prove yourself to me." Now that was my sinner's prayer, right there. That was the time when I said to God, honestly and openly, "If you're real, prove it. I need to know. I want to know." And so, here I am. Bishop Mark called me to his office one day, and I thought sincerely he was calling me to tell me off because I was being too evangelical in the church. There was a couple of us in Glenwood, and you know, we used to make the Pentecostals look calm. I'll tell you, we were convinced that everybody in this church needed to be on fire for the Lord, and we were determined, you know. And so I went out to see Mark one day. Daphne, I was on my way to Gander, and I was half crying because I knew that I was going to have to leave St. Andrews behind because I knew Mark was going to give it to me right when I went out there. Anyway, so I go up to Mark's office and sit down, wait for him to come in, and how you guys all know Bishop Mark? Hey, we're all old enough to remember him, except for you. And he comes in. "Oh, John," it's this squeaky voice of his, "what a lovely day." He said, "Now I want to ask you, have you ever felt you were being called into ministry?" I said, "No." No, I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. Over a period of a few years then, I began to understand that God was indeed calling me. So when I was 25, Karen and I sold our home in Glenwood, packed up everything we owned in the U-Haul, including 4 children, and I went to university. And you're not foolish, eh? Right? But we did it. And I've been a priest 23 years. Karen, wasn't it last week? Celebrated 23 years So here I am, folks. I've been a minister. I've been facing the challenges of ministry. One of the things that I am really involved with in my life as a priest and have been is I'm dedicated to learning how to be a good leader. I've gone about doing seminars, as much education as I can get in terms of leadership in the church so that I can come back and share it with my people. And I'm not here to do congregational development tonight, but
That might come later.
I get really excited when I talk about the church, because I've seen potential and I know that God is just waiting to move through the people like you guys that are here. There's enough of you here tonight to change the world. I'm convinced of that. Anyway, I won't get into that. But the reason why I'm saying is that at our church in Gander, at St. Martin's, when I went there, of course, I got heavily involved with that kind of thing, and it's really transformed and shaped the face of the cathedral. Not me, it's the people always together. We have a very loving and caring family at St. Martin's, and I need to stress that, because wherever I go, I want to tell people the good news story of a church that loves. And I'm sure in this town it would be the same thing. At least I would pray that you would have the strength to above all, love each other. We have a policy in our congregation, in our meetings, that it's safe to fail. And that means no nitpicking. If you're nitpicking, you have to be responsible for what you say. And when people begin to respect each other and care for each other, the love that flows through the congregation. When I got sick, I was off work for probably a year and a half, Karen, altogether. That parish would not allow me to go on disability. I stayed in the rectory and I got my paycheck every single week, like always. And that says something about who they are as a people. We were surrounded by love and prayer. And I'm going to get a little more into that in a few minutes. So I don't know if I need to say anything else about who I am. You've got an idea now of who I am, what kind of person I am. I suppose you do, anyway. I don't know, but that's enough of that.
I can ask you questions.
Oh, you can ask me any question you want. I'll try to get through this because I really want to give you the opportunity, to share. In terms of my illness, let me tell you, about 2 years ago, Karen, you can tell us the date because I don't know, but the day I was diagnosed.
4th of June.
4th of June.
During General Assembly.
Yeah, you went to my place, I believe.
I did.
Yeah. I was an alternate to General Synod who ended up having to go to General Synod because the person there wasn't able to go. And it was in the spring of the year, of course, because Synod is in June. Anyway, I've been feeling, every year in the spring, I get a bit of a sore throat. I always call it preacher's throat. I just sort of got used to it. When the climate changed and weather get dry or whatever, I'd end up with this itchy, scratchy throat. There was not much of it. So I just ignored the symptoms. Now, I was feeling tired, but at the time, I was renovating my house in Glenwood. I do most of my own work, and as I said, I was a mechanic. I did a fair bit of that contracting stuff too with my father-in-law. And anyway, I was working hard in the house, and the stroke kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. One evening, I was Karen and I were putting the window in the bathroom, and I started to cough and spit and blood. She looked at me and said, "John, are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." But I knew then I need to go see a doctor. The next day I was putting siding on the house. So that week we were putting new siding on, and I remember being on the scaffold. It was the moment when I gave in and said, "I'm not well." I was sitting on the scaffold, put the top piece in, and I sat down, and I was just so tired. I put my head up against the house. I said, "God, I'm going to need your help. I'm not well." Stubborn things, the thing, right? I went to my family doctor in Gander and shared that I was concerned about what was going on with me. He suspected I had a sinus infection. So he gave me some medication for that, and started treating me for that, and it didn't help at all. And I went back to him and said, I think I probably should see someone about this. So he sent me to an ENT in Grand Falls. I went there, and the doctor looked at me, and he put this machine, down your nose. And doctors, he froze this nostril, right? So he put the thing in and shoved it down this side. Every time I go into the house, so I have to do the same thing. One of those days you're going to get it right. Anyway, he told me I had the problem. There's a nerve. It comes from here, it goes down here, it goes into your jaw. When you eat ice cream, I had that nerve that gets off, right? He said, take some anti-inflammatories, you'll be fine. I don't see anything. I didn't feel good about that, so got back to Gander. The next day I phoned our dentist, and I went down and I said, Dr. Mass, and I said, I'm here for a checkup. But the real reason I went, and I told him, I said, the real reason I'm here, I want you to have a look at the base of my tongue. My throat was awfully bad. I said, I'm just getting a bit worried about it. And within 2 minutes, he said, you got a problem. He said, you better go see a doctor. So I had another appointment in St. John's, went in there, and within a couple of hours of seeing the doctor, some of you may, how many people here have had cancer in this room here in the church? All right. Okay. Dr. Bird said, you have a problem, boy. I said, well, I'm scheduled with General Assembly. And he said, you're not going anywhere. If any of you have ever met Dr. Burge, he's like short and sweet. Everything's right. No backdoors with that man at all. I was scheduled for a biopsy a couple of days later. I had the biopsy and remember waking up like you do when you're coming to. You got a tumor there, boy. I'll see you later. Down. And that's how it started. And I began to meet with the doctors to discuss treatments, and after we got the results of the biopsy back, he told me I had cancer. Stage 3, lymph nodes affected. So I had this huge tumor in the back of my throat. And he told me at the time that when he did the biopsy, the tumor had gotten so big that he couldn't intubate. He couldn't get the tube down inside. So we began a journey. I went back to Gander to try to get perspective on all that. Those of you who have had cancer know that your world gets pretty small pretty quick when they tell you got cancer. And I know that when someone tells you you have cancer, it could be really serious. It could be something you can deal with. It could be long term. There's just so many different aspects of it, right? So I go back and we got to tell my children. And they told us, yeah, Karen, in fact, I had to tell them, which she did. The prognosis wasn't a good one at the time. And what they basically told me was that, look, if we operate, your tongue has to come out, your voice box will be gone. He said, that may save your life. He said, what we can do is give you radical chemotherapy and radiation. We'll try to shrink the tumor in the hopes that we can stop it, we can arrest it. And we'll deal with the rest of it later. And he said, if it doesn't work, you can still have surgery. So that's what we decided to do. Knowing, he said, that your chemo is going to be really, really rough. Now, most of you have been on chemo, may have been on for 12 hours, 15 hours at a time. Does that sound about right? Maybe 20 hours. I had 3 different types of chemo, and I used to have to be admitted to the hospital because my round of chemo was 120 hours straight. Right? I was over 200 pounds. By the time it was all over, I went down to 89. Had a feeding tube in for 8 months, didn't swallow a bite of food, not one bite for 8 months. Couldn't get it down, couldn't do anything with it, and it hurt. And, radiation burns from the inside out. So all of my neck became, basically a 2nd-degree burn. And Karen used to have to use this burn cream, and the next morning before I went down to the house science radiation, she had to wash it off. And, it hurt a lot. So I went back together, and Karen told my children what was going on. Of course, they were all upset, it was rough. I asked my 4 girls to write me a letter, which they did. And I sat down with them and said, girls, I want you to know something. This is how Dad feels with this. I'm going to be okay. I might not live, but I'm going to be okay. I had a faith that somehow we were going to get through it. Now, I'm not a person that has a blind faith in God. I expect God to prove himself to me. And I know that God expects us to reason things out so that we understand where he's really coming from. Right? And as I get through this little story of mine, you'll see that come back into play, because you might be thinking, oh my, what a wonderful faith. Let me tell you, I got mad at God. I doubted God. Right? I shook my fist at heaven more than once. But one of the things that as I came through this, I had a sense, and I wrote about it in this journal that I have. I call it the giftedness of cancer. Well, let me assure you, if I could let that cup pass, I would have. I'm trying to get the good out of all that I've been through, but I would much rather have not gone through it. You know, I'll get to that. That makes sense to you, Daphne?
You take your time.
Yeah. So, I went to the church service on one Sunday morning, and I spoke to the congregation. I said, folks, when I make the announcements, and we're a congregation, we have a lot of fun. I tend to carry on a lot, perhaps too much sometimes, but if I don't carry on church, people think I'm sick. Seriously, I wore a pink bunny suit to church on Christmas Eve. I have pictures to prove it. If any of you are on Facebook, you'd see them. But that's just part of enjoying one another's company. Yeah? And anyway, after the service was over, and I basically cried my way through the Eucharist. Holy Communion, that's the center of who we are as Anglicans, what we believe for us. That's where we draw a lot of strength from. Right? And when the service was over, like always, I asked people to be seated, we'll have a little chat and talk about things, the people will ask questions or whatever, and I told them what had happened, and I told them the diagnosis. And St. Martin's is a big church, so it holds a lot of people. We were all crying. Something very powerful about that too, isn't it? Loving each other enough that you're actually, you know, and people don't just weep when Reverend John is sick. We weep for each other in that church. That's where we are. That's where we should be. Every church should be like that. Anyhow, I'm preaching now. Oh yeah, I'm a preacher. What I said to the congregation was this: you will know every step of the way what's happening with me. And I had already figured out what I was going to do. I started a blog. I started writing a blog that's published on the internet. Every time I would write, I would upload this. And that way, you will know. You won't have to phone Karen. You won't be wondering. And of course, at that time, I didn't know if I was going to be able to stay on as director or whatever. I didn't know if my ministry was over. I didn't know. And I wasn't long to find out how the people in Canada cared. They really cared enough, and they made it very clear what they wanted me to do. They wanted me to go and get better and come home. So anyway, I promised them that I would publish this. And for people who didn't have the internet, the wardens of the church and a group of people, sort of a subcommittee, would download it off the internet, and they would print it, and they would have many copies of it in church for people to take home and read. So I gave the blog a title. Now, on the internet, you have to have a web address, right? So the web address was, it's not always someone else. That's what I called it. The title of the blog was, Sightings of Grace in the Valley of the Shadow. Because right from the very beginning, I felt that through all this, I was going to see God's grace. And, you know, I wasn't kidding myself, because I knew it was going to be hard. I'm a minister in the church. I had buried dozens and dozens and dozens of people who had died from cancer. I had sat with people. I knew what they went through. They went through hell. My own father died of cancer. Dad went through hell. Having said that, I should insert a little something here. Before my dad died, before my mom died, we were reconciled through God's love. I held my father in his arms when he died, and I cried for him. And I was reconciled to my parents. Thanks be to God for that. That's another story. That's part 4 or 5 or whatever. Right? And I tell you folks, part of what I'm sharing with you now, I know I'm going to miss some of the things that I would have liked to have said with you, and I probably say, oh my God, I should have told him, I should have told him that. So, but I'm in Gan there. I have a telephone. If anybody in this parish wants to talk about any of that stuff, you can call me. I'll talk to you, if you can catch me. So the blog began to be a form of ministry in the parish. And I began to be amazed by the fact that people everywhere were reading it. I had 70,000 people read that blog. Blew me away. Now, I was too sick to care, but one of the things that I was faithful doing, even though I was in misery, and you know, the chemotherapy and the radiation was taking its toll, and of course I was taking morphine and whatever Karen could do to help me. We got to the health center, so I was so weak I could not walk down the parking lot. She had to drop me off by the door, bring me in, get in the car, and park the car, and come back and get me. It was bad. It was really bad. And I don't really want to dwell on that, but and because I know that, again, there are some people who have had cancer and had chemo and say, oh, it wasn't that bad. And I feel like saying, oh man, you don't know. But the point is this, everybody's suffering is their own. That's the brokenness, right? Not the extent of it as much, but the fact that we're hurting means a lot. And so I don't like to elevate my suffering above the person who's not going through as much. I just want to partner with people when they're in that, right?
Can I just interject there and say, I think hopefully there's people who see it the way I do. It's not elevating your sickness. It's really telling how far you went into that valley of sickness and how God brought you back.
Yeah, we'll get to that part.
Yes, but and I'm sure you're not.
I just don't want you to think I'm like Eeyore, you know, Winnie the Pooh, like Eeyore, you know. Science sure knows this name. Man, we have spiritual Eeyores in every church. I don't know if there's any here or not, but you know, I don't know, so I can get away with this, right? You talk to some people, you know, they come to church and say, Aunt so-and-so or Uncle Buddy, how you doing? Oh my. My son. On they go, right? And I have a prayer with them or whatever, and they say, oh, thank you very much. Oh, they're not going to help very much, but I really should have And then you visit them 3 times in a row, and you miss one day, right? Or you don't phone them, everyone's like, what's the mean never comes by anymore? You don't love me anymore or what? You know? I'm sure notice it, eh? Anyway, came a point in the whole journey where there was a couple of times, and I share a couple of things with you. We're talking several months, you know, of being in the valley of the shadow, for sure. Could I ask if any of you here have read any of the blog? I know Daphne's read it. Okay, so some of you are aware of it. Yeah, it's still there, it's still online. I was asked to publish it actually, but I said no, I'm just going to leave it there on the internet. If it's going to help people, fantastic. And I did find out that a lot of people were using it all around the province, and there was a prayer group in Australia that was reading it, and they were praying for me over there. In different parts in India, this is a great little story. In India, our church dug some wells there in a small town there. So the villagers were so thankful for this. They all went out by this well that we had dug, and they were holding up signs, and thank you St. Martin's and all this. And it was great, it was wonderful, so we shared it in our church. We dug 4 there all together over a few years. And they found out that I was sick, this group of people in this village. Now they had written me a letter before I got sick and saying that, thank you for the peace. And I'm reading this in a small, their English is not very good, but you know. And they said, it wasn't just water that you gave us, it was peace. And they told the story of all the violence that was in this village before they got their own well. They said to walk 10 kilometers to get water. And it caused a lot of fights. And he told me this one particular story of a family that had been reunited where they could now have a common source of water, whereas before they were fighting over who was going to be responsible for bringing water home to the elders. No one wanted to do it. 2 brothers hadn't spoken to each other in decades. So they said, our village now knows peace. And he made this inference that must be what it's like to know the love of Christ. Now they're Muslim in that country, but they really understood that we were working on behalf of our Lord. When I got sick, there was one morning I had it, I was miserable. I could always manage to check my email. The computer was in the bed with me all the time. I used to like it because it gets hot and the computer was nice and warm. And I checked my email, and there was an email letter from the same village. They went out to the well with signs. I could hardly talk about it with it. They had signs with my name on it. None of it was spelled right, and they sent, like, get better, we need you, we love you. God has a work for you to do. And I tell you guys, when I read that email, I got out of bed and went back for more treatment. It was just such a, you remember that morning, Karen? I know you do. It was just so powerful. She came in the room and I'm there crying. She thought something wrong. I said, this is the best thing that's happened to me in a while. I get back to Gander. One evening I'm taking treatment. Dr. St. Croix was my physician. And I came in because the nursing staff had called her upstairs. I had been asking for blankets because I was froze.
I remember you writing about that on your blog.
Yeah, I went into convulsions, and the reason why was the chemo had actually sort of brought me to the tipping point where if it had continued, I would have died. And she basically said, turn off this machine now, he's dying. And I was literally on the way out. That was the last of the heavy treatments that they gave me because I just couldn't take it anymore. There was nothing left to fight, that's right. By that time, of course, I had lost a lot of weight as well. She's the one that insisted on a feeding tube. If I never had a feeding tube, I wouldn't have survived. They put one right into here. And I got to the point, that was a hard day, getting a feeding tube. That was the day I had to admit that I needed help, right? Anyway, I remember lying in bed. I'm going to start shifting a little bit now, guys, because I need to talk to you about God. I always do this to high school students. I spring them up. God talk is coming. I warn them all. I was lying in bed. That was the night that I finally convinced Karen to go home and get some sleep, but she was with me night and day. I was lying there. She had gone home. She needed to get cleaned up. She needed a few hours. She was never gone for about an hour or two at a time. I woke up that night and I'd sort of settled down. Chemo had been turned off, and I was wide awake, fully aware, and I spoke to God. And I said to God almost exactly the same thing that I said when I challenged him to make himself real to me so many years before. I said, God, you got me where you want me. I am wounded. I feel like Jesus. I can count on my bones. Why are you so far away from me? Where are you? And I said to God, if you want to play the game, fine, you win. I said, just like that, out loud. I was in a palliative care room as well. That's where they put me. A room of hope. And it is. It's a room of hope. And I said, if you want to finish this off, okay, go ahead. I'm ready to die. Turn off the lights. Let's get it over with. And that's how I felt. I remember saying to one of my parishioners, I was telling her a story of how I had enough. And I said, God, here I am, I'm listening. She said, what did he say? I said, absolutely nothing. I lay there in that bed and I waited to hear the God voice. I waited to feel the presence of the Holy Spirit. I waited to hear and feel and know that I was loved and I was surrounded by His grace and mercy, and I never felt one thing. Of course, this dear friend of mine was in the church. We were just sitting there, and she didn't know what to say. I said, let me finish. When I felt that there was no God, that I was totally alone in this universe, and that Karen was about to be left alone in this universe, that there was nothing, no hope. When I finally admitted that, out loud, I'm scared, I'm tired, I'm mad. When I finally admitted all that, and I realized that I was still waiting for this God to prove Himself, when I realized that I was alone, that's when I felt the presence of God. And I've been a Christian. I'm a believer. I believe, because of my life experiences with the Holy Spirit. But I came to a point where I began to wonder if all my belief and all the stuff that I had been expressing was just part of a show. But I'm going to tell you, folks, in those moments, I have never, ever felt the presence of God like that ever before. It was real. And it's hard to describe because the pain didn't go away, the suffering didn't go away. And as a matter of fact, shortly after that, when we were in St. John's, the doctors called Karen and my treatments were all done, and they told her I had 3 months to live. That was a sighting of grace in the valley of the shadow that I can't totally explain to you. But I've got a feeling some of you can relate to what I just said about the loneliness and the emptiness. Because that's where God resides, you know. And so for me it was a time of renewal, a time of absolute trust. And I've never been afraid after that. There was one morning, I think it broke Karen's heart. We were getting ready to go down to the radiation thing again, and I said to her, I said, I think I'm afraid. And we started to cry. It was like saying goodbye, you know. Anyway, went back for another examination, and tumor had shrunk. They did an MRI, and tumor was basically gone. A few months after that, I went back and they did another MRI because there was a shadow that was turning up in the back of my throat, and it just turned out to be scar tissue. So I can say so much more about the whole journey, but here I am now. It'll be 2 years. I finished all these treatments in October. It'll be 3 years, yeah. And I'm doing fine. There's no sign of any cancer. Now, last summer, to add insult to injury, you know, I had all this trouble because, you know, I wasn't eating all this time. I ended up having to have half of my large bowel removed. So it's a great way to lose weight, you know. But they were able to join it up, and as you can see, I didn't have to have a bag put on my side or anything like that. My father had a bag on his side. And should I tell you the story one night of how Dad was drinking too much and fell down in front of the house? The neighbors called me to go pick him up. I drove up from Baggish-Key, and, you know, and by the time I got there, he was out still in the front yard lying there. I picked him up, put my arms around him, picked him up, and his bag burst open. Fastest time I ever brought Dad in the house, I'll tell you. Anyway, now, what have I gotten from having cancer? Boy, I tell you. I got a lot from it, and I do trust that God is going to continue to use me in His providence and in His will. I have met a lot of people. I met a lot of people while I was going through the whole process, and I've attended or conducted the funerals of at least half a dozen of them since. Some of those people had a prognosis that wasn't as bad as mine, you know. So there are days when I wonder, hey, why am I still here? And someone says, oh, you're good, Reverend John, nothing God's not nothing happened. You said, don't give me that. I cannot accept that because I am no better than anybody else. I'm not. But I've been given this gift of life that goes on, so I know that I have to do something with it. And I'm waiting to see what the Lord wants me to do, but I live every day with a sense of thanksgiving. I live every day with a sense of hope and a sense of purpose. But I also live with the side effects of having to have radical chemo and radiation therapy. I have what they call peripheral neuropathy. Some days it's worse than others. My feet, it's like I'm wearing woolly socks all the time because the chemo affects the nerves in the body. And my hands. I play guitar, and I'll tell you, for months afterwards I couldn't play a chord. I just couldn't get it to work anymore. And there are days now when I still have trouble with that. believe it or not, my throat was paralyzed. All this side here, all the muscle was gone because of the radiation. Right? It's turned into scar tissue. And I'll tell you, the people in St. Martin's were so patient with me when I came back, because I could hardly talk. And now you're preaching sermons and it's like, you're becoming a blessing, right? Right? You know? And of course, you know, I would laugh myself, you know, I had to, because, but let me tell you. So there's a lot of stuff I could say about how to deal with it. One of the things that I call the giftedness of cancer was how to respond to God in the dark. Now, I got these notes here, I haven't been using them, but let me tell you, Bishop David got me back into the swing of things, because worship was painful for me. The first Sunday I came back to St. Martin's, I was over at the house. Reverend Brian Cando was my assistant there in Gander. Very faithful friend. We've been friends for years. I thank God for him. Thank God he's in the parish with me. He was doing the Eucharist, and I snuck over from the house. What I used to do to get back in shape is, my house is just behind the church, sort of like where, I guess your old rectory is over there. I used to be able to walk across. And I would walk around the church and go home. First time I couldn't even walk up to church without help, so I just crossed the yard. But anyway, that's part of recovery. And no one in the church knew that I'd been over. I used to go every day and walk around pews, just walking around, try to get my legs working again. So I'd lost every bit of muscle tissue, right? And I used to be pretty good looking one time. I said to someone, I look in the mirror now, I see Keith Richard looking back at me. Some of you know what I'm talking about, right? You know the guy who likes songs, you know? The really ugly guy who plays in the car? Keith Richard. He died 10 years ago. They forgot to tell him. Anyway, Brian is up in the chancel preaching. I come in through the back door, and I stood behind them. You know, by now I'm right here in motion. We're all people in church see me. And they all start clapping. They all stand up and start clapping. And the kids in the back start running up, because young people want to be, you know. And Brian's there. And when he turned around, my arms around, like that. Well, we shed a few tears. So again, there's a story, as you know, I can't tell it now, I don't have time, of a process of me coming back to church. The first Eucharist that I celebrated when I came back was incredibly powerful for me, very healing for me. By the time I was done, I was exhausted. Anyhow, the last Sunday I was there, before I went to take my treatments, I did a painting in church. Now, I paint as a hobby. And I put an easel here in the middle of our church, and we had a video camera on the painting so people could see me as I was doing it. And I can do a landscape, like a Bob Ross type thing. Some of you may know who Bob Ross is. That type of painting, I can do a landscape painting in about 20 minutes. Pretty much complete, you know. I love teaching people how to do it. What I did is I started with a blank canvas. It's an object lesson that I've done it at men's conferences and that too, but this was very appropriate for that particular Sunday. They knew I was leaving after the service to go into town and start my treatment. So I started with this blank canvas, take a brush with some water on it, and just make the canvas wet. So it makes your paint run better, you know, acrylic paint. And I said, this is like the Holy Spirit, folks. You can't see it, but it's there. Paint in the sky, and in the background, some little mountains in the back, some purple paint, you know, pushes it back in the distance. And I said, no, this is where we start off in life. This is where we come from. And then a little bit further in the painting, a little on. I said, this is where we probably grew up. And we spent time with our family here and whatnot. And then we moved a bit further. Down there's a stage, and there's some fishing boats in the shed. And I do it fairly quickly. Not perfect, but it looks pretty good, you know. And then on the top, you start getting your paintbrush going mad, and there's this big green blob. Then it starts to look like grass, and then you put this big line down and make a tree. And also people say, wow, that's cool. You know, it looks pretty good, man. I always impress myself when I paint. And as I did each stage, I talked about how we move forward in life, and then someday we're going to be up here on this grassy field looking back over our lives. You'll get there. You'll get there too. And I said, then when you're looking back over it, that day is going to come and you're going to feel this little tap on your shoulder. And you'll turn around and you will see our Lord and He will say, that's mine, I'll take it now. So I said to folks in the church, I said, we're all going to get to this place. I may be there now, I may not get back to you. But I want you to know that God is in the midst of it all. So here's the thing. Believe it or not, I won't be much longer. I'll tell you a story. A little boy in an orphanage. On the grounds of the orphanage, there was this lake. The children weren't allowed to go out unless they were told. But they knew that in the morning the sun rose over this water. And there was this little boy who knew that it must be absolutely beautiful, but he wasn't allowed to go. They slept in a dormitory. And they couldn't get out of bed unless the bell rang. They couldn't go to the dining room unless the bell rang. It was forbidden to leave the room. Now that's not strange for an orphanage. That's the way it used to be. But he knew and he wanted, he had this incredible desire to see this. So one morning he said, I'm going to do it. Gets up before everybody else, takes his shoes, and he sneaks down out of the dormitory, down a long hallway to get outside, knowing that when he's out there, he's going to witness something. As the story goes, around the orphanage in the hallway, this tall hallway, imagine Hogwarts perhaps, like Harry Potter. And on one side are pictures of all the founders of the orphanage and all the leaders of the orphanage, and they're looking down like this. And on the other side are pictures of all the saints, and they're looking down on the people who walk back and forth in the hallway with their stern looks and pictures of them suffering and all this. The little boy doesn't look at them. He does not want to see their gaze on him because he feels it could be bad. He gets outside, he goes to the lake, and he waits. And the sun comes up over the lake. It's absolutely beautiful. He's inspired by it. I hesitate to use the word, it's awesome, because we use that word too much now. We forgot what it really means. But he is filled with a sense of something incredible and powerful. He gets lost in it. He looks at the time and says, oh my God, I'm in trouble. They're going to miss me. I'm not going to get back. They're going to be caught. So he's terrified for a moment. And he turns around to run back to the orphanage and he stops. Takes that one last look. Now the sun is up fully. And he says, thank you. Because now I know that the God of that orphanage is not the God of the lake. One of the things that I have received as a gift from coming to the valley of the shadow of death is that I have experienced that. And I really believe that God has called me to continue doing what I've been doing. The only thing is, I've been anointed, I've been blessed in a whole different way. Because suffering has its giftedness. I don't wish it on anyone. But you have a choice, you see, friends. And I'm hoping you can relate to this, because I know this is true for everyone. I recently did a retreat for clergy in the East, and when I finished my story of the orphanage, and what I'm about to share with you now, I said to the clergy there, I said, you guys really want to think I know my stuff, or I need therapy? By the time I was done, the whole room, all clergy there, I think, were in tears, because they knew what I was saying was right. Every one of us is going to hit a brick wall in our life. At some point, in some way, it may not be illness, it might be a relationship, it might be finances, it may be situations in your life you can't control, it may be memories, it could be anything at all. If at some point, and for some of us it happens more than once, it's happened for me an awful lot. You hit a brick wall and you realize that you've done all you can. You've done all you can. This is beyond your control. Now, I've seen that happen to people, and you can go either this direction or this direction. You can get angry about it, resentful, you can give in to it, you can lose the battle, you can stop trusting God, you can have doubts about God, which is all normal. You can get mad. You can get so upset. Or you can continue to trust. You can continue to look in a positive way. St. John of the Cross speaks about it. He talks about the dark night of the soul. And I would say to you, like, if you're at a point in your life where that's happening to you, it's normal. It's normal. And it may then, always look for someone, look for a spiritual place to go. And that's why the church is so important. That's why the men's groups are so important to us. Because you are able to share this stuff together. Grow in the faith, make it real, and be honest with one another. Nothing more powerful, I'm not saying anything that's not powerful with the ladies, but when men start to share the faith, it's amazing. Because we don't do it very well. We're not good at it. We're really not good at it. But when we are, we're something to behold. Right? Now I could start talking about leadership in the church again, I won't, because I want to finish saying what I'm saying. And I just want to talk a little bit about the darkness, and then I'm going to stop, because I've said an awful lot here tonight. I don't know, probably haven't said the right things, but I want to leave you with some inspiration in that sense. There's St. John of the Cross spoke about what he called the dark night of the soul. Very faithful believer, but he was given to these times of incredible doubt and pain. And he wrote a series of writings that tell us that that's who we are. That's the challenge that there is to being human. And he says that. In one of his writings, we sort of learn this. In the darkest night, remember that the fight that you're fighting is being fought by God. And the challenge is to let it be, to let God fight for you. And he would also say that in the darkness, when you're feeling so alone and afraid, that when this feeling of total helplessness comes, even though you can't fight it, just gently push against it. Don't accept it. Do the best you can. And he also teaches us that you never make a decision while you're in the dark. You never make a decision while you're in the dark. Because you know that inevitably and eventually morning will come. Right? It will. Now, like I said, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I could share with you. I think it's probably wise to stop, because I've been talking now for almost an hour. So I think I'll probably just leave it at that. But there's so much that I do have to share, obviously. And I guess what I'm saying is that in the church, in my parish now, my ministry has changed because the congregation accepted this wounded man back into their midst. And the healing that I'm going through, I'm still going through, is largely because of the love that we share as a church. We call it authentic. We try to be real. And my prayer for all of you guys here tonight is that wherever you are, in your church, in your lives, in your homes, that God's healing will be poured out upon you. Daphne, you should probably stand up for a minute, because I know you're hurting here now. I'm going to close. There's one story. I'm not going to read the whole story, but for parish clergy, ministry is really something that it takes a lot. There's always something to go on. But that's life. All of you. I bet you everyone here is too busy. I'm just going to remind you of something. An old childhood story. How many of you here have heard the story of the Velveteen Rabbit? What? You know the story? Oh, it's a great story. It's not long either. You should get a copy and read it. Whenever I talk to people who are getting cancer or just found out or whatever, I bring them a copy of the Velveteen Rabbit. As soon as I tell you what it was about, you say, oh, I know that story. There's a little boy who had a rabbit given to him when he was a child. He was a fairly rich kid. And of all the toys in the nursery, he loved the Velveteen Rabbit the best. And the Velveteen Rabbit, as the stories go, could think, well, the little boy didn't know that. And the Velveteen Rabbit always wondered what it meant to be real. Not to be toying in on her. What did it mean to be real? And as the story unfolds, the boy plays with this rabbit more than any other toy in the nursery. And the rabbit becomes a little bit raggedy because it's being used all the time. He drags it everywhere. Like, you probably had something when you were a child that you dragged everywhere, right? You know, kids with their blankets and their favorite toy. Anyway, the story goes, the Velveteen Rabbit just longs to be real. And in the nursery, there's this skin horse. It's a rocking horse. And he has a discussion with this particular toy. And basically, the toy tells him that you're not real until you've been loved. And the cost of being loved comes with your hair being worn, you're taking lumps and bumps, and you lose an eye, or whatever. But it means you've been loved. And once you've been fully loved, that's what it means to be real. So often when I look at someone who's had a hard time, it may not just be cancer, it could be a marriage breakup, it could be just, well, you know, anything that destroys your life. It could be coming through being bullied in school, or knowing friends who are being bullied, right? Or people who are being attacked because they're different. If you get through it, you're never going to be the same. I mean, look at me. Like I said, you know, I'm like Arnold Richard. I could have been beautiful. I've been through it. My wife has been through it. But when I look in the mirror, I can honestly say, I still feel the love. And I know I'm real because of all of that. That's one of the things that you can receive by going through a hard time. It makes you real because the love that accompanies it is just so powerful. So like I said, when I know someone has cancer, I give them a copy of the Velveteen Rabbit and I sit down and talk about it with them. I usually cry with them too. So there it is, folks. I'm on the other side of all my treatments. I'm preaching, teaching,
Singing.
doing the same old stuff that I've always done. But I tell you, you're never the same. I'm not the same. And I'm glad of that part. Last year, I went out and bought a motorcycle. I ride every day. And I didn't have a mid-age crisis. I didn't buy Harley. I bought one of those crotch rockets. She's fast too. Seriously, yeah. But for me, the bike was a symbol of hope, of a future. Because I used to ride that when I was a kid, anyway. So I guess I have to sing to end this. Do I now?
Yes.
When you carry the guitar in the back of your car. I know you're here, but I can feel you. I will